So I want to talk about some of the other things that I've heard that should be a part of the management, I would assume. But what happens in the case of credit card payments and draws and distributions? And like I've seen people pay off personal cards from the company and then the other person's pissed. Then there's like, what happens if there's a divorce from one of the family or one of the partners gets a divorce? What happens with the wife or the husband, the spouse? Do they get
Sure,
ownership now? How does what are your
sure.
thoughts there?
Those are there's a lot packed into what you just asked me.
How about you deal with cash and contributions and
Yeah.
taking money out
Start there.
first?
Yeah, let's start there.
So yeah. So the operating agreement will typically have a distribution section, and by and large, absent some other agreement, the distributions are supposed to be made pro rata to the ownership, right? And it's not uncommon for that provision to be amended to where, somebody like who started it and brings on a partner. Well, I've got a bunch of equity in this. I'm not going to make you buy into the company, but the ownership distributions are going to be uneven until this financial threshold or whatever. So it's not uncommon to have that, but the standard provision is distributions are pro rata based on your ownership. So if it's 60/40, that's how we distribute it. And then whether distributions are discretionary or mandatory is another piece of that puzzle. You know, you don't want to have mandatory distributions for a company that doesn't have the money to distribute. So a lot of the times, especially in the early phases, those are discretionary. But in the situation that you're talking about, um, in that situation, and then kind of the inverse, uh, there can be equalizer provisions where, okay, we paid off a credit card or you paid off your own credit card. That's going to be booked as a distribution. And then the cash coming out for distributions when that happens is going to be unequal because you receive that benefit. Um, Generally speaking, I would say that somebody paying off a personal debt out of company funds without everybody's approval is very and not
Yeah,
if you can.
I've got another client you need to call who does forensic accounting.
Yeah, that
Anyway,
it's not, and I
that's a sign.
yeah. If it's a one-off and you can fix it with altering the next distribution out of the company, that is great and optimal. Generally speaking,
Not someone you want to work
uh,
with.
yeah, and typically that snowballs pretty quick into bigger expenditures for personal benefit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sometimes
One
there's
thing on the distributions that I see come up, and it's worth mentioning, I think, is a lot of these companies are pass through organizations. So if they make money, the owners have to pay their share of the taxes on the profit. And one owner might have a lot of cash, not want to do any distributions and leave it in the company to grow. The other one doesn't have the cash to pay the taxes. So a lot of times you'll see, or I'm aware of, I don't know if it's a lot of times, provisions that say we will make a tax distribution. And of course, then taxes might not be the same. I mean, even proportionately, they might not be the same because so some level that we will pay this amount of, we'll distribute this much toward taxes. Might be enough, might not, but we'll do it.
yeah,
Right.
and those provisions are typically discretionary, non-mandatory, kind of left to the manager or the vote of the members. And the tax provisions of operating agreements can get very involved, which is why, in addition to somebody like me, you really want to bring your CPA in at the ground level. Certainly for bringing on a partner or starting a multi-member company, because the default for anything in a multi-member company is you're going to be taxed as a partnership. But depending on the circumstances of the company and the industry and the individuals who own it, maybe you want to be taxed as an S corp, and I don't know that. That's why I try to stay in my lane as much as I can, and not what I just said is about as far as I go on tax
Okay.
speak at all, because the CPAs are the experts in that, and I would defer to them every time. And they need to be involved in the conversation when you're starting a business.